Where is where is Mike Taylor when we need him?
But we have Mike on a bike if he hops back in.
Oh, Mike on the bike on the beach.
Can you share that thought that you had, Rami, when you have a chance?
Yes, Domenico. I'm hoping that that he comes back and listens or hops in here, because I wanted to give it to Mr. Del Pino, since he actually inspired me to thank him to share this. And it looks like someone has just asked us. Here comes Mike on a bike. We'll see if he's still on the bike.
Oh, welcome, Mike on the beach.
Okay.
Oh no, he's on the bike. That's right.
Yeah, I
He was on
switched
the
to the
beach.
bike.
Mike's on the bike.
Or are you getting
Can you hear me?
Welcome, Mike on the bike.
All right. So what inspired me to share an Islamic concept of the Almighty? It actually stems out of something that Luis Del Pino said, which was between the zero and the infinite. Now there are many forms of infinite, and I would think that the simplest way of saying infinite would be to say beyond the number that we can count. Or that an individual could count. And people have come up with new number systems to help us count further, which helps explain also why we have many forms of infinity. But he said between the zero and the infinite. So to say that there is a zero, which was a creation out of places like India and Central Asia, there's a wonderful history of the development of the zero, is to say that there is a placeholder for no thing, or a none count of anything in particular. It is the absolute infinite possibility could be claimed to come out of this placeholder. And that is very much like the Islamic concept of Allah, which when you break down in Arabic, this always struck, it kind of took me, and maybe it's a misperception or a misreading of the words, but la in Arabic is the word no. And Allah is like saying the no, as in it's different from a Christian concept of God, because in Islam, God has no children. In fact, it stems out of the teaching that was given to the Jews, which was create no idols. So, and the great act of Islam was Muhammad and his followers going back and taking the city of Mecca and going into the Kaaba, which is that room that's often draped in a black sheet with writing around it. And they went in and they took out all the idols and they smashed them, because there are no gods but Allah. And the best way to represent God is an empty room. In fact, to this day, that room that Muslims will pilgrimage to and circle 7 times is a place where the Arab family and maybe some clerics and some invitees from outside the world will be sometimes invited in annually. And what they'll do is just sweep the room out, because that is the closest idea or conception of God. It's this of no idols, which was very important in that time, because especially in the development of Christianity at that period, you were having a pantheism sort of taking place. I think Muslims help keep Christians and Jews honest, because what they're doing is taking it and saying that there is an absolute, that absolute floor, which I think can be applied when we look at the universe, which all the beliefs say that came out of God, is a result of that non-corporeal entity. If you read Genesis 1:2, you read God created the heavens and the earth. Or in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Is Genesis 1:1. Genesis 1:2 which is shared by both the Jews and the Christians. And the Muslims would say, we respect the earlier works, and we don't try to convert people from people of the book of those earlier works, generally speaking. The next thing in Genesis 1:2 is the idea of the Spirit of God being on the face of the waters. So you have perception in that earlier concept or belief. So there's a whole religion or set of religions that come out of this idea that and the key phrase is the mixture of systems of belief, because what the Mohammedans were seeing, or were arguing rather, was that they're mixing their beliefs and their belief systems, and they're getting away from God, and they're creating idols in the process. And they felt that they were having the true religion, the original religion, the one that saw God as the source of all, but was never limited by man's creation of these dumb idols that people create for themselves and then bow down and worship, which is ridiculous, but it was documented in the Old Testament. It's true to this day in that people will create, let's say, computer systems and then spend all their time thinking about them, which is a form of worship. That's enough.
I can share, Rami, the concept of or practice that people have on precepts, commandments, rituals, such as the Wailing Wall and all that. It can either pose, if a person goes inwards, have I actually lost my way, or have I actually deemed the external world the way? So, for example, if a person goes inwards, they have an inner guidance, you know not to harm another human being, because you realize, why would I want my own kingdom to be harmed? We've lost, I can only speak for myself. I've lost my ways in a lot of ways. So there's a couple of ways there. So when we do all these ritual procedures, and then do the precepts and the commandments, for me personally, it's a way of indicating that I'm no longer tuning inwards with insights, imaginations. There's other words, actually. The word gives it away. And, again, we all have to leave. I look at things such as I'm going on hiking and I'm seeing different colors that people paint on trees to guide me in certain areas. Now, could I get lost? That's pretty straightforward. I could easily get lost. You know what I mean? Am I really ever truly lost? Probably not. So people do practice a lot of these things because they don't go inwards first and say, is the pen thicker than the sword? Well, both of them are misleading. When do we have to harm anybody, and when do we have to make laws? Like the concept of law, for me, I've kind of corrected it. Again, it's not even correct. It's another perspective: light, air, wind, and space. But we think that what man do, we do policies. Like, I don't know what controls the light. When I look at the sun, I see a object in the sky that gives out a certain amount of light, but it doesn't give up all the light. Same with the moon. In stories such as we're going to have these two spheres, they're going to rule. I've never heard in the biblical stories about owners. I've heard about rulers, Lord gods. You have a Lord. Adam will call the story that he's a Lord. Never gave the designation of a god.
Not canonical, is it? Is it in Genesis?
It's in Genesis. It's in Genesis. But again, once again, Rami, everybody changes.
Dominion was, I think, the phrase.
Yeah. Okay. Give dominion. Okay. So you have opportunity to rule over the clouds and all that. And then there's this creature that you're going to be able to create and put in the garden east of Eden. They don't even give the name of the garden. Now, I know people change the word God, small letter God, and there's the big God. God rested on the seventh day. Well, then what did he create on the sixth day then in his image? Because on the seventh day, supposedly the physical came to be as a possibility. You know what I mean? Like, and what are these durations of these days? And in the beginning, on the first day, what was prior to that? These are all possibilities. And if a person goes inwards, but for a lot of us, we're so conditioned. When I say so conditioned, that we're looking for answers. That's part of the conditioning, that we think there's an answer where you go inwards and say, well, maybe I'll know it. Maybe I'll have wisdom. Maybe I'll have understanding. Like even the tree of life kind of gives it away the way they depict it. There's knowledge, and then there's understanding, and then there's wisdom on either side. And then you have this thing called knowledge within, like almost like a baby, but then they're both under something. Hence why when people actually get to that awareness, they have concept of people getting a crown or a halo. because these are the king and queen. Like obviously we're living like on the band rush world of stage, where how do we get the ideal of mastery or slaves? How did we get the ideal of genders? You know, we're like, it's one of those things for me personally, guys. I just ponder those things. Couldn't give an answer even if I wanted to, because really what works for me could be totally delusional to somebody else, let alone delusional for me. So like I said, I've never really heard the concept of owners. Rulers, yes. People will say we rule. I said, okay, but who's the owners?
Right.
You know, well, maybe that's not my role to know that, but maybe to understand the game, how it's played, if there's a game. So
Hierarchy of concepts is what I pulled out, and also there's a response to the question in terms of length, and there's a psalm that says, "What is 1,000 years to man is one day to God."
Mhm.
So, and that is man trying to come up with an understanding to understand the concept of this being, which is the beginning and the end, when connecting to the universe, not just something like the age.
well, even that, Rami, you know, certain
Rami.
things have come to me, and I've heard maybe one person ever share this, the concept of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, from what I grasped. Again, I couldn't prove it, where there was certain language presented to the human race, whether spoken or intuitively, where the tree of awareness of the spiritual and the material.
Right.
So, you know, a good man or a good person, a spiritual person, is coming in to have an evil experience, a material experience. You know, but that opens up to the question, what is material and what's spiritual? I deem things spiritual, anything that I can't pick up with my senses, the unknown. I can't see language.
Right.
You know, I can't see emotions. Yeah, but I see emotions. You're expressing them.
You can process language because you hear it. It comes
Yes.
through these compression waves, and your brain interprets it.
Like a computer.
Everything of it. Well, like a human brain. A dog brain interprets language and can have a vocabulary of a certain number of words. And there's even a dog called Bunny whose owner is setting up all these language buttons that when she presses on the button, and her vocabulary is up to 80 words that she can use to communicate back and forth with her owner.
But isn't that us, Rami? Isn't that
Rami.
us, Rami? Rami, sorry.
Bunny is the name of the dog.
But isn't that us, Rami, where we try to get another species come to our awareness, where most of us, if not, I can't say all, most of us, I can't say all of us, couldn't pick up the sound pitch that a dog could pick up, or
Right.
certain animals, they know to flee because maybe because their four paws are on the ground and they're picking up potential of an earthquake. So species are all fascinating, but us typical as humans, we've got away from investigating each other or within oneself.
There are people who do that, though.
Yes.
I want to go back. You had mentioned the tree of life, and then you had mentioned the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which are two separate trees. And thank you for mentioning them both. And the way I perceive or interpret the idea or the concept or the story of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is that to me is I see it as a continuum between perceiving, which is how we begin and how we're created, to judging, which without perfect knowledge, you always run the risk of judging wrongly. And I think that's where death enters into the equation. So I think that God makes us as perceiving entities, that the serpent comes up and convinces us we can be like gods ourselves by going and taking into this other thing, which is judging, which only a being with perfect knowledge would be able to do properly. And I think that when we start judging is when we begin to die, because not only do we as time progresses make bad judgments for ourselves, but we can also make bad judgments for others, such as prosecuting someone for a murder they did not commit and then through the state murdering them.
I don't know necessarily it's a bad judgment. That's a cardinal judgment where son, take wise counsel. You know, the kings that came for the Israelites, he was taking, what's his name? I forget the first king, because not David, the one prior to David. Saul. And the only reason is because they no longer wanted God to talk through one of his prophets. So I'll give you what humanity's, all the other nations have had. So, but I'll give you wise counsel. Wise is the feminine aspect of discernment, but we use a cardinal judgment. We think that we understand everything, but then we have to go to the story of Job. Really, so who set all the boundaries on everything? This is us always talking with our ego mind, where it's never really learned to know its place. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm the teacher now. No, you're still a student. You're sharing out loud, but you're learning from within. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. you know, and people will know that. No dogma is going to give you that.
Right, and
Right?
our job is to become good soil.
That's a good term. That's a good term. Yeah, become the soil, and then something can fertilize on it.
And also to keep ourselves from being polluted from the world. That's James 1, the back end of James, chapter 1, verse 27. Religion, which God the Father views as pure and righteous, is to look after the needs of widows and orphans and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world.
All humans, because people do have wars and they do follow certain entities, and then they end up doing bloodletting and all that. But even the concept of the world, we've so mislead ourselves because we're just one aspect of it. The world is so beautiful the way it is, but it's the human race that's only one part. You know, the sequoia tree, redwood trees, brings me down to humbleness. You know, then we look at the ants. They're probably looking at me. I can only assume, and that's a pretty tall human being there. But why are they being so destructive? That it's kind of like the Toy Story. The one guy said, "I just need a little bit more space, and a little bit more space." Well, you're polluting the world.
Just to introduce a couple of so the Quran, just another Islamic concept here. I'm giving very small ideas here. But that body of work has these sections, and one of them is called the ant, and another one is called the cow, and it is a exploration of the universe through these perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's like when I talk to Muslims, I'll say to myself, "You pray to Mecca, but do you recall where they used to pray?"
They don't pray to Mecca; they pray towards Mecca because they feel that is the Kaaba in their belief system.
But prior to that, Rami, they used to pray to Petra. That was the economic hub of the world. Now, whether or not
hold on. Let me finish the idea.
Okay.
So the mythology behind Mecca is rather particular. The idea stems from after the period of in Genesis, the first son by Sarah's handmaid, Hagar. Hagar. I'm not sure how her name would be pronounced. She had a very interesting way of describing God. She described God as the God who sees me, because she had been cast out by Abraham's wife, Sarah, with her son. And then they were going to die in the wilderness without any water. And the angel of the Lord comes and provides them with water. And they go out, and God flourishes Ishmael. And that's why Hagar in this encounter says, I know now, for I've seen the God who sees me. This is God who recognizes even a handservant or a slave and sees her in her trouble and answers her prayer and provides her with salvation and relief. That is the universal observer in George Berkeley's system. And not only does the universal observer observe, but in cases and situations, the universal observer can actually reach down and provide, because who owns the universe? This may be a later concept put upon it, but I would say they who created the universe owns the universe, and that is why all of physicality, time, and space belong to God. And we are granted parts of the physical universe, space within the sets of time within our lifetimes, upon the condition that we operate in accordance with God's commands, which at their base are, if you're working out of the Jewish system, it's 613 kindnesses. That's the meaning of the word mitzvah. If you're operating off of a reduced set, let's say Judaism in the time of Maimonides from 1,000 years ago, he was able to look at the 613, reduce them down to 13 principles. If you're operating out of being a student of Jesus Christ, then you'll read in the New Testament when the Jewish scholar asks, what is the most important commandment of those? And Jesus responds, not with one, but with two. And he says, it's to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and all your strength. And then the second most important is to love your neighbor as yourself, which is to say, and then later we hear that Jesus' claim in terms of how to love God is by way of loving the least of these. So anyone who doesn't have it as good as you love upon them. And when you love upon them, then what you're doing is loving upon God.
I guess, Rami, if I can share, Rami.
Yes.
There is the concept of lords again. So our Father is a Lord. He is not, the other gods, our grandfathers, they rested. So this is my perception now. I'm just going to go with it. The Ismails, that's their offsprings. They're still doing like other nations. They're sacrificing. That's why when you have these other child, don't sacrifice. Don't be like those other nations. So when they're praying to Saturn, they don't realize that we have actually been put into another realm, another physical realm. So hence in Revelation, there will be a new earth and a new heaven, but no sea. There's a reason for those no seas. We don't realize when Jesus actually put the pigs and their spirits back into the sea, because we don't see beings. We think just because we live on the earth, the dry land, that's our whole plane. No, the earth just means dry land. So now this is where people have to realize that the Muslims have been misled. They're following a particular rule, but you got to love it. You got to love your Lord, your Father. You got to love him, because if you don't love him, then how is his?
Yeah, I'm not going to argue and judge that the Muslims are. I know that you are, but I feel like I have to give a bit more detail and also close the loop, because I hadn't completed that idea. So in Islam, God has no children. And I would argue that is very much a response to the relationship that Ishmael had with his father Abraham. And I need to finish that story. So in the Islamic mythos, what happened, because we know that Sarah died and Abraham later had even other children with that's Moses's wife that he had, which was Midian's daughter. There's another woman, and he winds up having children with her after Sarah's death. But the first child was with Hagar. Well, anyway, in the Islamic mythos, Abraham comes back and visits, and he has a reunion with his son Ishmael. And what Ishmael and Abraham go and do is they go and find the site of the first altar that was set up by Adam back in Genesis, and they reestablish it, put it together. And so when they're worshiping, they're not worshiping Mecca or the Kaaba. They're worshiping God at the site of the first altar that Adam set up to worship God upon. So that is the mythos of the Islamic system. It is so closely tied. Most non-Muslims don't know this, and I don't claim myself to be a Muslim, but I know the stories because I spent 4 years in Saudi Arabia, and I've also listened to their sets of beliefs. So what's the significance of that? The significance of that is that the Muslims saw that altar had turned into a place of worshiping a polyphony of idols. So what the Muslims came in and did was come in and smash all the idols and get back to what they felt was the true original religion, which was to worship God in essence, which anything beyond that would be idolatry.
Well, Rami,
Rami.
I don't know what I'm just going to say R. I don't always like to be corrected, but I get it's important to you. So I try to identify, I'll just call you R.
Okay.
For me. Okay. So R, in this particular case, whether people are aware of this, not that the gods, not the demigods, they're reawakening in the next couple of realms. So these demigods are going to be punished because how they've allowed to guide man, M-E-N, not man, because they're the man, and they'll have to pay for it. For us, we're like the grandkids of our Father. And whether or not we understand how the oceans work and the land work, sacrificing animals.
So there's another important theological concept, and that is that God has no grandchildren. Now, I'll give you the exception first. Dante Alighieri.
I was using human analogies.
Sure, I get that.
Well, do you? I'm sharing out loud. That's all I'm doing, Randy. All right, that's all I'm sharing out loud. You're very scholar, and I respect the fact that you're scholar. I'm talking very intuitively. Now, whether I'm full of something, it's not debatable. It's not even argumentable. It's basically, I'm sharing out loud, and really, whether or not I'm off, this is how people end up saying, listen, in all these different religions and all the dogmas, better to say all the dogmas, because the dogmas include state and all that. If a person doesn't realize the written work teaches the hemisphere to be very literal, and you neglect the other 10 receivers. Now, that's important when I'm hearing you are, but the thing is, when you say things like, let me finish my thought, it's not your thought. You're just sharing thoughts.
Yes,
now,
you're right.
Well, it's about being right. All right, it's not about being right. Do 4 of them, you've done a roundabout. It's just about sharing. I couldn't tell you if I'm right or wrong. That's a human condition that we all have. It's like when the person says, I agree or disagree. If you truly understand the senses, I'm not going to pick up your senses. I'm going to describe objects.
Well, what you've done is rediscover some ancient ideas that then later got developed further and were thought out further, and I'm giving you the further development of those earlier ideas. The reason why it's said that God has no grandchildren is, and I'm going to start again with the with Dante Alighieri's response. He said that art and the things that people create is in a way sort of like God's grandchildren, because God creates man and man creates art. But the reason why we say that God has no grandchildren is because though God sort of can revel in and love created beings and what they create, what comes out of people is but a further expression of that same human spirit which God breathed into the physicality, which is humanity and all life. Well, at least mankind, according to the story found in Genesis, because in Genesis, he doesn't spark it with the finger like the famous Michelangelo. He breathes his own breath into the nostrils of Adam, and thus mankind becomes alive. And that is what Jairo mentioned as the universal consciousness. And that's why it's tied to the solar plexus, that organ that, whether we're thinking about it or not, propels and moves our lungs and allows us to respirate.
I think we're getting back feed from Java.
But what I'm saying is we don't have to be caught in unknowledge. We can be explorers and receivers of knowledges which have already been developed. It's okay to hang out, to explore all the different corners at each level, and I wouldn't fault you at any time for doing that. But I wouldn't want to leave you there. I wouldn't want to leave you there. I'd want to move you forward.
That's again all conditionings. You know, we say words out loud. Like, once again, if a person truly realizes when you go inwards that really you're not living in the outside dead world. The rebirth is the death process. So now, when you're saying to me, I wouldn't want to mislead you, I do that quite well on my own, and I'm actually the only one that does that. So for you, you're going to read scriptures of somebody else. Like, okay, so how many people back in Egypt understood how the pyramids truly worked? How many people actually?
Great question.
Well, no, these are questions I give myself. So, and I go onwards. I'm only going to share the question itself, the inquiry, the prayer. Then I go into peace, silence. Then I go into meditation. I listen. So now when I say, okay, well, who gave us the alchemy of language? Don't know. And if I do know, how am I going to share that with somebody else? Now, somebody can give me a latent amount of books. I'm like, written books, we already have millions of books. How many more do we need? That's a written version of it. And most people become scholars from that because they don't realize when you're writing certain things, I don't care if it's Mandarin, not Mandarin, the symbols that they use in those languages, that does something to repetitiveness. Same with the mind, very repetitive and all that. So our ongoing program are going to take that information, but do we ever go inwards and question it to no end? Not to an end, to no end. Because a person don't want to do that because then they would have to become disenchanted in the enchantment. Like the word illusion means the play, but it's not the physical, that's the karma. The thoughts that we have is illusion. The material, the emotions, those are illusions. This is me talking for myself.
Okay.
Now, somebody could turn around and say, Dom, you're playing with words. That's a given. For me, that's a given that I'm playing with words. Now, am I going to explain the tonality in it? Well, probably not, because I have to explain it to myself. And once I do that, I'm like, okay, how would I explain it to somebody else? I couldn't.
All right.
I couldn't even debate anybody on it. but I enjoy, because I've heard you do lead words such as arguments. You like to argue things, but are you doing it internally or externally? If you're doing it internally, then you should be as silent outside. I'm an agitator. I call it for what it is, but I'm agitating myself. I'm not agitating you.
Okay.
I'm not agitating Jay. If it does, it's only bringing out what's already in there. A person can't be angry if they're not already having it within themselves. Now, if you know how to use it correctly, if there's such thing as correctly, such as, I'm actually angry. Why? Because this person violated me. He doesn't understand the 18 inches back in the days when they had a handshake. We don't, because it's like when you talk to an alcoholic, they've lost the balance of distance. That's why some of them are really close to you.
Okay. I want to get back to Egypt, because you brought up that set. And also, I want to counter one thing that you stated. I don't think there's any such thing as a wrong emotion. And in fact, I would claim that emotions are tied to, in a way, I'm not sure if it's a loose or strong tie, but to intuition. And also, emotions are responses, generally speaking. They can inform us of how we feel about a thing. And I think that's important to think about that. But how we feel about a thing is the result of how we perceive a thing. And how we perceive the thing could be where the lie exists. So people can get caught up in fear and then always be in a reactive response mode. But if usually the fear is through the lack of an understanding or of a prior experience, because there are a lot of real world demons out there, or at least personified people who will mislead and cause people to be operating out of fear. And those are folks usually seeking to control other folks. Getting back to Egypt, if the history that I've read is correct, then the system, or the primary system, at least of one of their ages in Egypt, was their set of laws was the 42 laws of Ma'at, M-A'-A-T, 42 laws of Ma'at. And these were 42 laws that you had to follow prescriptively. In other words, in order to be a member or citizen of the civilization, you had to do these 42 things. You had to be shown to do them, and not to do them would be to sin, to miss the mark. And who Ma'at was a goddess who rode upon the Nile, who wore a feather in her headdress, and for every sin that you did where you missed the mark, where you weren't following in accordance with that civilization, its rules, its 42 rules, then at the end of your life, when it came time for you to cross the river into the next realm, if the weight of your soul was more, which could only be weighed down by not following the rules, if it was more than the weight of the feather within Ma'at's headdress, then that would not be a good afterlife. And that was the system of religion that enabled something like in Egypt to influence and to help. This is technique. How do you get a whole bunch of people to build a pyramid? Well, you have them operating within a system, and the real artificial intelligence, or the real groupthink, or the real methodology of controlling people is by convincing them that this is the way that the universe works. And in order for you to have a good outcome in that universe, you obey the rules, you comply with the system, you build the pyramid.
I guess when they started manipulating humanity in the African/Egyptian times, they did so much manipulation. So that's why you have pictures of animals on top of humans and all that. There's a lot of manipulation going on, like they do with dogs today, from the two species of wolf and coyotes, where you have to now make precepts for these beings. You know, the previous beings, they didn't have to actually, they had their own consciousness and they can rule. But us as a species of them, like even what they call in the Garden of Eden, it was a female of some sort that was able to reproduce. You know, when the Lord punished Eve because of your sin, you're going to have to now start having offspring. That was never designed. So then they had their first twins or whatever.
That's not how I've read.
That's fine. I'm sharing out loud. How you read it, that's your story. When you put your head on the pillow, you're sleeping. Not me, that's your sleep. So
Right.
now my interpretation of it, okay, because I've listened to it many times and all that, but this is my interpretations. Okay, I don't need to write a million more books. There's already enough out there. So now,
Well, you're doing it right now.
Yes, I'm sharing. I'm telling out loud.
But it's sort of it's not accurate to the original story.
Once again, you're saying accurate. Like, when did you get the power to think it's accurate, Rat? Think about it before you answer it. I already know where you're going.
Okay.
You're responding. You're reacting. Are you
Right.
actually doing the ability to respond? Listen inwards.
Okay.
So when Adam was punished, the land was cursed because you and his first boy gave products from the ground. He says, son, I can't bless you because the ground is actually cursed. So now this is me interpreting it. Now, is the story far-fetched? It could be. It could be. You know, it's like giving me a math formula and I change one number. I could answer the question what we think correctly, but I've actually somewhere along the line, I've changed one number. This is R talking his way. You make it a point to correct people on how they pronounce their name. Like, that's egotistical. You just don't know it.
Well, how they pronounce the
Doesn't matter.
It's called proprietary. Propriety.
That's important for you. You're very straight. You're very literal. That's fine. That works for you.
I'm not only literal.
Yeah, then fine. Then be flexible then.
Yes.
You know, be receptive. Be open,
I
be
have to
accepting.
praise you, Dominic, for
There we go.
following it through. Only because you made your point, and I have to praise you.
I didn't make a point.
What you did was you provided an insight with regard to the connection of Cain to the land.
Maybe.
And yes, I think you did. My argument was only with
Once again, hear the word that you just said. Hear the
Argument.
word you just said. Why do you use the word argument?
Why?
Do you think everything's an argument? Do you argue with your wife? Do you argue with your cat?
Yeah.
Why? The question is why. Not for me. No, don't answer for me. This is for you. I could care less.
For me,
Rami,
it's to stay straight.
Listen to me. I said this to many of my acquaintances. I don't fucking care who you are. So put my language.
Okay.
I don't care because it's your responsibility because you're living with you.
Right.
This is your journey. If you want to listen to Socrates and Plato, which are all dead, their teachings could bring value to you once you realize within oneself and say, okay, does it bring any? There could be a gold nugget in there. There could be many.
Yes.
So for you, when I hear you, I'm hearing you. I'm not listening to you. I'm already listening inside. And it's getting agitated because I realize you bring out something on me, which is fine. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. Because when I'm in my own little world, I'm like, okay, so what did he get from that? What did you get from it, Dominic? Forget about Rami. Rami's insignificant to you in your world. Insignificant whatsoever. Your little smirk gives it away, Rami.
Well, that's your perception. My
course it is.
smile is I respond to situations that are difficult
Rami,
with
let me
laughs
ask you
and
something.
smiles.
What am I supposed to take? Last time we talked and you asked me about marijuana being legal. What clever ploy were you using on me? Be honest now. Be honest for the first
I
time.
don't know the laws in the province
No.
of your
Hold
country.
on. You're asking about me. You're just going along about way. Rami,
Right.
it's time for you to grow up a little bit in certain areas. I already know I'm an infant. I'm a child. And I'm an agitator. So when you ask me the question, with all sincerity, what clever game were you playing by telling me? Because you can't understand what I'm saying?
I was trying to understand from where you were saying it or from what influences were causing you to
You're
say
being
it.
clever. You're still not being honest, Rami. You're still
Are
not
you
being
sure?
honest.
Because you're either picking up on something operating in my subconscious or you're assigning to me a certain judgment, which I have not assigned to myself.
If you follow the conversation, nothing was said about
I'm
doing
sorry,
hemp.
Hyro, you're speaking with your mother, which is fine, but please place yourself on mute.
I think you can mute him, Rami.
Oh, yeah, that's true too. Nope.
Let's hear that conversation. I've already deviated. I apologize.
It's okay. But arguments to me aren't necessarily emotional, they're just conceptual. It's part of the British analytic sort of tradition because here in America, at least by way of studying George Santayana, it's been brought up that America is sort of, at least into the turn of the 20th century, it was a